Welcome to the Lightforge. Today is September 20th, 2015. This is Adwukta.
Hey guys, this is Merps. Glad to be here, and we've had a somewhat of a busy week. If you saw the Arena class tier list is out, hopefully you guys have been enjoying that one.
Yeah, it came out today, and if you're listening to this, who knows when. But we went over in the last Lightforge our class rankings, and they haven't changed much. But what we did do is we got Hearth Arena confirmation with the stats. And what happened is it pretty much matched our expectations. There's not much really to report on the stats side besides the big prediction that we were making, which is that Paladin win rates were going to drop. The week one TGT meta, Hearth Arena pulled all the stats, and Paladin was doing insanely well, much better than Rogue and Mage, and definitely better than the other classes. And we predicted it was going to drop off, and it was going to continue to drop. So we got the next 2 weeks data. So everything, actually 3 weeks by now. All the data besides that very first week. So we just took off the 5 days in the unstable meta when no one knew what to do with Murloc Knight, and we took the rest of the record and we looked at it, and it pretty much matched where we thought the classes were. Paladin is by far, well, not by far, it's by some significant margin no longer number one. Number one is Rogue, as we've been saying, and we're glad the stats matched up to that. And number two is Paladin, which still holds a very significant lead over the Mage. But with our tier list, we had put Mage, and we still have Mage equal to Paladin. So let's just go over very briefly why we think Mage is ahead of Paladin still, despite
Sure.
the stats.
I think it all boils down to, in the end, the hero power, right? And the hero power for the Paladin, although it's great and it's especially good with the Inspire mechanic, mages have always had the ability to have initiative with their hero power, and that one damage is always good, no matter if you're playing aggressively, if you're playing control style. And I think part of what makes Mage so consistent is that they have no true weaknesses, as we addressed in the article as well. In the weakness section, Mage doesn't really have any. They have strong board clears, strong removals. They can tempo out, they can play slow as well. I think Paladins have more kind of win right now cards, right? Muster for Battle, Coghammer. Those are two cards in which if you play them, you just increase your win percentage by a lot. But with mages, because of the lack of weaknesses and because of just the strength overall, I think that's why we bump it up a little bit higher.
Yeah, I like that. If you play those cards, you will win. That's a lot of Paladin cards. It's not that Paladin's a skillless class. It's probably like middling in terms of how much skill can impact that class. But we all know Paladin's much stronger on the board. We all know there's no secret to how Paladin gets on the board. So there's kind of a little less of a skill effect. And when you look at infinite players, Paladins are one of the classes where, for the most part, infinite players do relative to their other classes not as well with Paladin as regular players do. So if you average like 4 wins per run, maybe Paladin's like 1 or 2 wins ahead of some of your other classes. But if you're an infinite player, it's kind of just like hovering there in like a very good class, just generally. So we factored that in as well. Our class rankings are done from a perspective of if you just maxed out this class in terms of skill and you played like 1,000 runs for consistency on it, right? So
Yep.
not sure how it's applicable to most players, because, and we're going to get into that. Deep Fried Meta today, which hasn't happened yet, but Deep Fried Meta is going to get all into how to use this tier list, this class tier list, and what it actually means for you as a player, rather than our tier list, which states very clearly at the beginning, it's purely hypothetical, it's about perfect play, it's about a ton of sample size, and so we'll get into that. And I keep forgetting to do this. Let's go over what we're going to talk about today. This is the preview that should have happened in the beginning of the show, but is happening now. We're going to talk about Deep Fried Meta, which is going to discuss what classes to play and how the tier list, how to use information from the tier list to your advantage, and how to improve with the understanding, with the context of the classes that are in the arena. And then we're going to talk about a question from the GOAT, Car Good Bad with Argent Squire, Argent Horse Rider, and Argent Commander. We were just going to do Argent Squire, and then we thought, why not stick all the Argents in there? They're all the same. We're going to do a class discussion on the Mage because that's our Arena Coup class. Finally, it's been like 2.5 months since we played Mage. And that's our schedule for this Lightforge. And if you're wondering, by the way, where this tier list is, the tier list is, and all of our articles are going to be on HearthstonePlayers.com. You can click on the left-hand side where it has a grinning goat corner, and that's our content. Or if it's right when it's published, it'll probably still be on the front page. So all of our articles, they used to appear there back in the day when we first started writing articles, and we haven't done it in about a year, and we're kind of going back to it.
Gosh, it seems so long ago.
I mean, time passes fast when you're having fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so in addition to the deep fried meta discussion today, we're going to have about the tier list that we've already had. You'll see me on Value Town on Monday night with Krip and Hafu and Chanman. I don't know if they're going to be a podcast, but it's in one of those like video podcast formats. Like I don't know if it's actually a podcast yet, but I think they're on SoundCloud or something. But you can check that out, or you can just Google it. They used to be pretty big, and it has just come back in the last couple of weeks as Chan Man returns to the Hearthstone world. So I'm excited to be on there, and I'm excited that they're doing one like purely arena focused episode. So
yeah, it should be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go on without further ado to Deep Fried Meta, where we deep fry the meta. We now have a tier list. And now that we have a class tier list, it's kind of settled, and we've only gone over the top stuff. But how do you use the tier list, right? Like, should I play only the top classes because they're better, right? That's presumably why they're on the top. Should I play the lower classes? Should I just play the middle classes? What if I'm better with one of the classes than the other, even if that class is rated like, let's say, only middling, right? I'm just a great shaman player, and I kind of not so good with rogue or paladin.
Yeah. So first of all, I'm going to go very broad here and just say, play a class that you like playing. Sometimes, we try hard, but sometimes we forget that we're playing a game here. And this game, I believe, and I think Adwix believes, is pretty gosh darn fun. So fun is definitely part of the equation. If you like playing more aggressively and you like going face, play Hunter in the arena. If you want to play a very slow control style, maybe play Druid, maybe play Mage. But
don't play Druid. Druid is fast. Come on. We just wrote a whole class tier list that talks about how fast the Druid is now. And you go and call Druid a control class.
It can go faster. But it's that flexibility, right? With the Druid, it always goes back to flexibility. But anyways, past the first point of just having fun, I think if you are a beginner, what you should do is focus on 2 to 3 classes that you like and that may be similar at first, and just play those classes. There's honestly no shame in playing the powerful classes.
So what do you mean by similar?
I think by similar classes, so like for example, if you're playing Druid, that's a very minion-based class. Why don't you play another minion-based class like Warlock, for example? You can pick these two, and they're very different in terms of their hero power, but you can play it in terms of, well, these two classes are always reliant on the board. It's not like Shaman, in which you can play off the board depending on your draft. So you can look at it in that way. You can also look at it in terms of, well, I'm just going to play all the ping classes first. I'm going to play Druid, I'm going to play Rogue, I'm going to play Mage, because I want to get used to being able to use the hero power efficiently, using the ping efficiently. And I think with Inspire mechanics, that's a good strategy as well. So you can find a key similarity in 2 to 3 classes and just say, all right, I'm going to practice with these. And also, you want to be able to just improve your gameplay with certain classes. And if you play it evenly, I think you'll see improvement anyways. But to build up that confidence and to build up that familiarity, I think focusing on 2 to 3 classes of your choosing is a better method.
Yeah, I agree that if you're looking to really improve, whether you're at 2-3 wins and you want to get to 4-5, or you're at 4-5 wins and you want to get to 6-7, or even if you're at 7.5 wins and you want to get to 8 wins per run with that class, you really have to start limiting your classes to 2 or 3 to really see the improvement. And I would disagree with saying Druid and Warlock are similar in in any way because Druid you don't have to play on the board. There's so much flexibility. Warlock, you have like no flexibility when you're actually playing. You have some flexibility in the draft, but the actual game is you want to be on the board, you want to be on the board, you want to be on the board. But when you're playing, even if you're using very similar classes, like let's say a faster mage and a rogue, for example, you still can draw the differences, right? You still can't play both classes the same. And those kinds of differences are something that'll help you improve. And that gets me to my point, which is that if, on the other hand, before you're set up to just play one class and try to dominate with one class, you also will find more results if you pick one of the classes that are more frequently seen in the meta. Because a good way to know how to take care of classes is to play the class yourself and then figure out, oh, I hate being put in this situation. And then when you're facing that class, to put your opponents in that situation. So right now in this meta, I would recommend that anyone looking to improve, play a lot of Paladin, play a lot of Mage. This, is not great for the rest of us who want to see a more diverse meta. But if you're really looking to improve, those two, or at least one of those classes, should be one of the classes you're focused on in improving. Just because you'll also pick up so much good, like, kind of side benefits from the matchup by learning what that class doesn't like.
Are we contradicting our advice from the Lightforge episode 2, where we told people to play different classes?
You should also play different classes. We're kind of contradicting our advice, but you do have to focus in on some, right? Like, I wouldn't just totally avoid the other classes, but if you don't focus on a class, it gets a little more difficult to see the extreme, the smaller nuances. Within that class, right? Because Rogue and Mage and Druid all have a ping for a hero power. They all have spells that deal damage. They all have minions, right? But they're not the same class. They don't play the same. And if you have never touched a Druid before and you start touching a Druid, it's going to be very different than Mage. And at the same time, if you keep touching Mage, that's not necessarily going to make you that much better of a Druid player. So
you should hold off on this much touching.
I think it's an appropriate word.
There we go. But going to the idea of that, I definitely agree. I think that's a very strong point, that if you play a class, you get used to kind of like what you have in your hand. You get used to how you play out certain situations. By you seeing how you set up a consecration, how you set up for a Blessing of Kings, how you set the board up, and then you see on the other side, it just clicks in your mind that, like, oh man, this person is trying to bait me into a consecration. I have done this before based on my hand, so now I know how to respond appropriately.
Yeah, and more than just class. I know this is like, oh, we came up with a class tier list. We're talking about class now. But I think even more important than which class you're picking and which class you're thinking about is which archetypes you're thinking about. Because most classes, almost all classes, can go to at least two types of archetypes very successfully. And the way you play around those archetypes is very different. So if you play Mage strictly as a control class, that's fine. But you're missing, first of all, as a player, you're missing out on this huge opportunity to draft really good mid-range rogues or mid-range mages or really good aggro mages. And your drafts, if you keep trying to make them control, will suffer in quality because of it, right? You can either make one good aggro deck, one good mid-range deck, and one good control deck with your 3 mages, or you can make one good control deck, one slightly less good control deck, and one significantly less good control deck. You can make the draft go either way. Which one of those do you think is going to overall help you improve more as a player, and which one of those do you think it'll help you get more win rates in the long run? It's always the more diverse option. So while you can, make sure you're always selecting the classes you're the best with or the classes that you're trying to focus on, you can't really select your archetype without suffering the consequences. So it's that, in that sense, it's very different, I think. So you can focus in on a class, but focusing in on an archetype, I think you should try to play all archetypes kind of evenly. And that's what we do, and we try to go with where the draft takes you. And it may be a little tough at first if you have a particular style, like you really like tempo, you really like to be on the board, and you pick classes that go to it. You can still draft towards that, but if the draft is not going there, like, don't force it. Play some control, play some mid-range, and because you'll face mid-range rogues, you'll face control rogues, and at a certain point, you shouldn't just throw your hands up and say, "Oh no, this rogue looks like he's playing a control game. What do I do?" Well, if you played a control rogue, you know exactly what the weaknesses are. You know exactly which situations makes it the most awkward for them. You know exactly when they're going to try to take over the game, and you're just in a better position to know the flow of the game to win.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. One of the key differences between learning constructed versus learning arena. In constructed, you can really limit yourself to one deck, right? It's not just one
Mm-hmm.
class. It's not just like one archetype. It's one deck. You don't have to play anything other than that. So if you're beginning, and let's say you put in some money and you wanted to make Dragon Priest. You made Dragon Priest, you're going to play it. You know exactly the mulligan, you know exactly how to play that deck. And not only that, in the meta, in the tier one decks, there's usually only around like 3 to 4 tier one decks.
Mm-hmm.
And, you have to account for some of the tier two decks as well. And let's say it's going to be less than 10 decks. So you are using your one deck and you need the counter, or you need to know how to play against these less than 10 decks, and that's constructed right there. In arena, it's very difficult to get arena because there are so many variables: the cards that you draft, the class that you draft, the archetype, and then you take into account your opponent, who also has random cards, random classes, and they might go control rogue or tempo rogue, aggro rogue. So I think that's one of the reasons why it's important to limit your classes in the beginning, because we're trying to limit one aspect of it. If you just expand and say, I'm going to play all classes, I'm going to play all cards, I'm going to play all archetypes, it's just way too tough. And we're just trying to limit a couple of these pockets to make sure that you're able to master this important aspect of the game. And so far we've been talking about archetypes and classes. Even with certain cards, you have to get used to them, right? Like we were talking about the rogue, and a card that people definitely need to get used to playing is something like Tinker's Sharpsword Oil, in which case it requires so much turn planning. It requires not so much turn planning, but because unlike in Constructed, where you need to, or where you're able to prep into Tinkers to guarantee it'll always hit something that you can attack with that turn, I would say 70-80% of the time in Arena, you're dropping a minion and then playing Tinker. So there's always that 1/2, 1/3, 1/4 chance that it'll hit the minion that you just play. And you have to take that into account as well. So not only do you have classes that you need to get used to, you have archetypes that you have to get used to, and you have cards that you have to get used to.
Yeah, and I know players who really don't want to take a sprint, but it's a really powerful card too. And it's not like, oh, you pick a sprint, you're gonna go slow. No, you can go really fast. You can use sprint to draw into your reach, right, to finish off the game, or to just have more stuff to all throw on the board on one turn. And that's all, that's all good. It's not the greatest card, but if you don't know how to play sprint, and you end up with a sprint, because if your other cards are crap, well, that's going to have a big effect. Especially these kind of tricky cards that you kind of need a place to play, right? It's one thing to never play a stone skin gargoyle and then have to play it because your other options are crap. It's not going to make that big of a difference whether you've ever played with the card or not. But something like sprint, one, you're going to have to play with it a lot more often, or else suffer really large drops in value. And two, if you don't touch it a lot, you're just not going to know what to do with it more often than not. You're not going to be as clever with those kinds of cards. Tinker's the other good example. And with a class like Rogue especially, right, there's so many things. There's with the hero power and setting it up and all of that, there really takes a lot of practice. And we stressed this before, right? Rogue it's like the pro class. It's the class with more decision making than any other class, because you start off in control and you stay in control, and at some point you're just kind of dead. But until then, you're pretty much in control and you have to make a ton of decisions. So just to kind of also go into a little bit about our history, when I first started playing, I obviously started with Mage, picked up Paladin very quickly, and focused in on those were the two classes that I focused on. Played a little bit of Shaman as well. Back then, Shaman was really powerful, and Druid was always one of my favorite classes because of the consistency. And then I tried Rogue, and I just kind of was not great at it. I wasn't bad at it. It was kind of an averages class to me, but then I just never focused on it until I was already an infinite player, before I went back to Rogue, and I said, okay, well, I know this is a good class. I know some people have been saying that it was even better than Mage, and obviously there are people getting very good results with it, so let's figure out this class. So you could definitely go back and pick it up, right? And now Rogue is one of my top classes, and at that point, right, that was around the time I picked up Rogue was around the same time I picked up Warrior. because I had never played warrior before then. That was one of the
Yeah.
worst classes even back in classic. And eventually I was like, all right, well, I guess I need to start playing warrior to try to get that 12-win run. And it turned out to be one of my best classes in classic. My second best class after mage, with a pretty large sample size. So you will find certain classes that you eventually you just feel very connected to. But when you're trying to improve, you have to focus in. I think you really get more results by focusing in on 2, 3, at most like 4 classes.
Yeah, and that's something we talked a little bit about, but didn't focus on. We start off with the question of what class do I play, but the tier list also doesn't really address what classes are the easiest to play, right? And there are some classes which are definitely harder to play than other classes. Shaman, I think, is a very difficult class to play. Rogue, obviously, but Hunter as well. And with the Rogue, it's hard to play, not because it lacks power, we have it at number 1, but just because of so many decisions that you can make. And it can just be very confusing. A lot of classes you can play on curve. Like Priest, for example. I'm not saying Priest doesn't require skill. It actually requires quite a bit of turn planning, but a lot of times you just drop your stuff. There's no real thought to hero power in the first few turns. Rogue has a lot of choices. With Hunter, a lot of times it's very unforgiving. With Hunter, you need to get exactly that amount of damage.
Yeah.
It's the most
You
punishing.
have like 3 decisions you make as Hunter in the entire game, and that determines whether you win or not so often.
Yeah. And a lot of times you just have to turn plan for that lethal, and you have that one.
Yeah, like 4 turns ahead of time.
Yep, 4 turns ahead of time, and you have to just make those predictions. With Shaman, it's playing with and around the RNG in terms of drafting, in terms of your crackles, in terms of your overload and plan turning like that. Shaman has an extremely high ceiling, but it's definitely not a beginner class, because if you don't plan out your turns, which is usually a weakness of beginner players, you're just going to get steamrolled because you're not going to curve out. You're very weak because you lack pings, and you have a lot of weird situational cards.
And by planning your turns, I don't mean just like I don't think we mean just overload. Like I have things to play, because a lot of players don't even do that. But like just being able to add, like I don't think maybe you don't know, but I don't think adding is very important in this game. And just being able to add doesn't quite get you there when it comes to turn planning. You have to plan what your opponent can possibly do on his next turn on top of that. And then you have to plan what your opponent can do on your overloaded, like the turn following your overloaded turn, because that whole segment is the end of the swing. So when you're playing Shaman, you have to plan the swing out, and then you have to know what your opponents can do to recover. And you have to, the best swings happen when you have a way to disrupt your opponent's counter swing, which always happens afterwards for Shaman, because the only way you get swings with Shaman is to overload yourself. So. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the actual tier list, which I know we haven't gotten too deep into. The actual class tier list, and we haven't gotten too deep because you guys should really just read the article. It's kind of all laid out in there. But the ordering, we said it was Rogue, definitely number 1, then Mage and Paladin tied, and then Druid. And then I think last time in the Lightforge, we had Shaman next, and Shaman is still next. But rather than saying that it's like almost as good as a Druid, we've decided to put in a little bit more of a gap there. And that gap was just in recognition of the RNG that is inherent in playing as the Shaman. And we both played a couple more Shaman runs, and we've seen the effects of just a little too unstable for a good player to really take advantage of. And you do have to adjust to it, right? Ben Brode had this great quote interview something where he says, "Oh, RNG is good for better players. Why? Because better players can respond better to good RNG and bad RNG, and it just puts them on their toes. And so therefore, RNG is good for good players."
It's kind of a poker mentality, right? It's kind of the same thing as saying like the good players, even though like poker is just a probability game, if you keep on putting yourself in the most statistically favorable position, you're going to win at the end. Phil Ivey, Negreanu, they made millions and millions off of not guaranteeing 100%, victories, but just putting themselves in that 60-40, 70-30 over and over and over again. So I think that's what Ben Brode was going for. I'm not sure the
Uh,
community loved it, but
Screw the community loving it. Like, who? I don't know who's actually buying that line. Just because, like, what is RNG, right? If RNG puts you into a situation where you have to respond, that's fine. If you actually get a new problem that you need to respond. But so much of RNG in Hearthstone is not something that puts you in a position to respond. It actually determines games. Like what drops out of the shredder, where the bombs hit, how much you get on that crackle. That's not like, oh, I put it in a good position, so it's good. Or, oh, we're getting all equal value stuff, and so we have a way to like use all of it. You're limited in what you can do by your cards, by your mana, by so many things. So when you're an average, like if your chances of winning a particular matchup, let's not say average players, because he's talking about this in a constructed sense, where a lot of times in a tournament, both players are really good. So it's not like they're average players, they just each have a 50% chance of winning. And then you say, well, you now have a 70% chance of winning the game or a 30% chance of losing the game. That takes skill out of the equation. Or even if you say, but if you're skilled, you get like 3% more chance of winning overall than if you're not skilled. Well, if my chances of winning as a skilled player used to be like 80% or like 75%, and you've just knocked me down to a 30-70 coin flip with a 3% skill benefit, I'm still losing out on this RNG equation. This RNG is still not good for me in the long run, over the course of all the iterations of the games, and even if I play at the maximal skill level and my opponent is like a vegetable. It would still have the same negative result for me compared to like a game of chess. So it's not that I don't like RNG. I think it's kind of disingenuous to say good players are better with RNG. Good players are not better with RNG. Good players can mitigate RNG. And in certain situations, like, for example, spare parts, I think are a great example where RNG actually favors the good player enough that it like the ability to use your spare part effectively actually favors the good player enough to offset the RNG nature of the spare part. And the spare parts are all roughly equal value, right? Those are all very important things. Something like a shredder, I think, is a very different story, right? You can get 2 mana cards that are just a 1/1. That's not equal in any way, shape, or form to like a mill house, right? Or a weird 2 mana card that comes out.
I think that's a great point, and I don't think he differentiated between what you define as good RNG versus bad RNG. You were talking about, like I have a shredder, you have a shredder. We bump the shredders into each other. You get a 4/4 or a 4/3. I get a 1/1. The game is just decided at that point. There was nothing we could have done. As opposed to good RNG, which is something like Matter Bomber, right? Matter Bomber is
sort of. Matter Bomber is like half good RNG, right? Like you can line it up, but then the bombs can still all hit your face.
Right, but the setup, there's at least a half step there that requires you to set it up, which I think is valid. And I don't think TGT helped because one of the main mechanics was Joust, right? And there's nothing.
Oh my god, that's the worst RNG.
It really is. There's no skill involved. There's no setup. A lot of times, because you can't even do anything with the Joust pre-jousting, right? With the Matter Bomber, you set it up pre-dropping the Matter Bomber. Especially with something like the Master Jouster, you drop it and you're just like, well, this Divine Shield taunt determines the game. If I get it, I am in a great position. If I don't get it, that's terrible. And I have to commit the 6 mana in order to just see what happens.
Which means you're not going to do anything else the rest of that turn for the most part.
Exactly. Yep. So it's huge. And that's a good example of bad RNG.
Yeah. So, like, I get, if you want to argue for RNG, and I like RNG, I think I'm one of the players more in favor of RNG compared to other like good players because it's fun. Like I love slot machines. I have a gambler's mentality, right? I have an addictive personality, and the more RNG you throw in a game, sometimes the more frustrated I get. But overall, I have more fun. I'm more addicted to this thing because there's RNG. That's why I'm not sitting here playing chess, right? That's why we're playing wizard poker because there is RNG. And you get rid of that, or like you limit it to certain degrees, and it's a lot less like the classic meta in Hearthstone Arena was less RNG.
Yeah.
But what that means is usually by turn 4 you know who wins, and then you're just playing out the motions, and that is not as fun. So, from a pure fun perspective, and we're players of the game partly because it's fun, at least partly because it's fun. So, you can make that argument. I think it's a great argument. And you can make the argument that being a good player mitigates the effects of bad RNG. That's also a good thing. But you can't go right out there and say, like, good players are better with RNG. No. Good players are worse with RNG than bad players because there's a great equalizer, which is the RNG. And that effect, for the most part, especially the way Hearthstone's been printing cards, is larger than the effect of any mitigation that skill can provide. So,
Yeah, and I think we have to just keep an eye out for it. At this point, we are like some people are crying that the game is out of control. I think it's fine. I think not only is it fun, skills still shines through, right? We still see good players getting to very high wins. Both of us we're doing absolutely fine in the TGT meta. I think after like the next expansion, we'll see where it goes. Blizzard has been fine so far, but Joust definitely didn't help. And then,
but that's the thing, right? Next. Like Joust also, because we're following up a very RNG heavy kind of like TGT expansion. I mean, GVG expansion, right? That was very RNG heavy. And then BRM kind of like pushed things along. You have some Dragon synergies, but they're big swings, but they rarely happen. So that stabilized things a little bit. And TGT has only a couple Joust cards. I know people make a big deal about Joust, but like think about the number of Joust cards there are and where like how frequently you see them in the arena. It's not that frequent. And the dilution effect on the old cards, I don't think the game is that much more RNG right now than it used to be. So like overall in the meta, I think we're fine. I don't think it's like a huge deal. I didn't like what Ben Brode was saying and how he was trying to present the issue as if, oh yeah, we're gonna just put more RNG and it's gonna be good for everybody. That's not the truth. And if he doesn't know it, I think he knows it because the response has been so big from the community on it, especially like the competitive community. And you see the Blizzard like qualifiers right now for BlizzCon coming up, and just so often RNG determines, like when you have players of that caliber of skill with that much preparation and constructed with like decks that are that tight, it just so often the game is determined by pure luck. Instead of like misplays or like good deck constructions or like beating the meta, that overall I think it's more of a constructive problem than an arena problem as far as the meta goes. I think the arena self-balancing thing means that the RNG is kind of all taken in stride.
Yep.
All right, so just to wrap up the tier list for listeners who don't want to go online and like look up our tier list, what's going to follow after Shaman, after the big divide, right? I call it the big divide between Druid and Shaman now. So you have the top 4 classes, and then you have the rest of the classes, which is Shaman, and then Warlock, and then Hunter, and then Priest. And then you have the ninth mythical class that you probably won't know it exists if you only play the arena. But I assure you it exists. You can go watch Constructed tournament play, and then you'll see it. It's the Warrior, and we felt we'd be equal with everybody. So it was a struggle, right, at writing the tier list, because you have to like write about every class as if it were a serious class in the meta. So we had to give it, find the Warrior's strengths, and we have to find its weaknesses, and we have to talk about just like how to defeat a warrior in the arena or how to use the warrior to success. And I think we did what we could with the class, given what Blizzard gave us to work with. But you can be the judge of that. Okay, now let's move on to a question from the GOAT.
All right. So I thought we'd spice it up this week with a slightly more fun question. So the question is, and I'm just going to let you answer first. If you were stranded on a desert island, and you could only bring 3 characters from Hearthstone. It could be a hero, it could be a card, whatever you want. What 3 characters would you bring? Now, there's a caveat, because I thought of this. You cannot pick Flying Machine and fly away from the island. You are stuck. You are stuck on this island.
Okay, so North Sea Kraken, and then I'll ride him off of the island.
There is no escaping.
There's no escaping from the island. Okay, nope. So I'm just stuck on an island. And the rest of humanity is fine.
Why do you care?
What? Of course I care about the rest of humanity.
Yes, your family and all of your precious loved ones, and the Hearthstone servers are okay.
All right. Well, now we've covered the important part. I'm glad you got to it. I was going to try to push you until you get there. Okay. Well, 3 cards. I want a tournament medic. Okay. So the most important thing here is engines. because you need something that has a repeatability, right? Something like a battle cry or a death rattle is not good. Death rattles really aren't good because whatever card you're picking, you don't really want it to die. And you just need something that can be triggered repeatedly. Inspire is a good mechanic because presumably, am I a hero? I'm a hero, right? Can I assume I'm a hero? Otherwise,
No,
I can't trigger the Inspire.
No, you're just
So
you.
I can't trigger any Inspire mechanic. I'm kind of inspiring. What if I feel like I can inspire the cards?
I
And
think
get their
everyone
Inspire
has a hero
mechanics?
power inside of them. Okay.
Okay,
That's
great.
my PBS thing for the day.
Great. So I don't even care what my hero power is. As long
No.
as I can inspire the tournament medic, we'll get free healing for the community. And then two more. I want, like, I'm not a very physical person, so I need someone to, like, do the hunting or, like, just, like, fight off the panthers or whatever. So, either, like a volcanic lumberer or, like, ancient of war or, like, a Tyrion, like, something like that.
Okay. Legit.
And then,
legit.
yeah, right. And then I got one more slot. I think that's it. I don't even think I need another. Maybe, like, well, let's get Manatai Totem. I need a Manatai Totem to continuously draw cards. I don't know what cards they are, but one, they'll keep things interesting, and two, cards are useful.
This feels like cheating. This feels like a genie came up to you and you're asking for more wishes.
Well,
Although I did
kind
not
of.
specify.
I don't specify, like, cards, right? Like, I don't know what cards I'm getting. It's RNG, right? You wanted it to be fun. Well, I'm making it fun.
Okay, you made it fun. Congrats. Okay, so I interpreted the question a different way. So you went by the black letter of the cards. I thought that if I got the card, they would just do what they would do repeatedly. So I picked Refreshment Vendor because I want funnel cakes, although they're actually carrots.
So you think
but
you'll
it's okay.
repeatedly play a card repeatedly?
Yeah, I mean, they're just there, on the island. I thought about the protection issue as well, but instead of Tyrion or a taunt, I picked both because weather elements.
What would you pick?
Both Ram Shield. Haha.
I don't even know what that card is.
It's a legendary card. If you take damage to your face, the minion takes it.
Oh, that's
Because
actually really good. 'Cause
weather
you can get around
element-
taunts.
Yeah, exactly. You can go around taunts. Yeah, you did not prepare for this at all.
I did not. Oh,
What
I
did
was
you
gonna
do?
get hurt.
So you go for both, and then you go for something that heals it, like an Earthen Ring Farseer or something. And boom, you got food, you got protection, you're good.
Okay, but okay, fair enough. But you just interpreted this as saying battle cries can go on repeatedly.
Well, we're stuck on a desert island with 3 Hearthstone cards.
Fine, just okay. I'll give it to you. I'll give that to you.
Okay.
All right. So those are the correct answers. There are no other answers. And if you did not come up with those 6 cards or some variation of it, you were wrong. And you should really look at yourself in the mirror and be ashamed.
Yep. Shame
Okay.
on.
So now we take. We're kind of halfway through. We're a little more than halfway through, but with the Lightforge. But I want to take this time to thank our patrons. We've had this patron campaign for like 10 days now, and we've gotten so much support. And it's been wonderful. And the patron really lets us do all of these things, like writing this article, which would otherwise get us like in no proceeds and takes up a ton of time. And it also lets us, do the podcast, which again gets us nothing because there's not even commercials. And it takes a ton of time to produce and sound edit too. So thank you all the patrons. If you're wondering when your names are going to be actually read on the Lightforge, it happens after a month of being a patron, because that's when patron actually collects your money and the goat gets fed. Before that, it's just a pledge. Okay, so moving on. Card good bad. So this is a segment that I think it's fair to say it's been more than 6 months in the making since we first saw the stats that Hearth Arena collects and tells you the win rates of cards, right? And Card Good Bad is the segment where we tell you whether a card is good or bad. And today we're going to tell you whether Argent Squire is good, the classic card, the 1 mana Divine Shield 1/1 classic neutral common card that's been around with us since beta, whether Argent Squire is good or bad. Merps, take it away. Is Argent Squire good or bad?
Oh, this pains me to say it, although the evidence is so stacked against me. So in my mind, in my humble opinion, but it doesn't matter at all against the mountain of evidence, in my mind, Argent Squire is like a pretty decent card, pretty good. the stats say Argent Squire is basically the best card ever, and we're gonna break it down. We're gonna analyze it a little bit.
Okay,
But
just to lower expectations a little, by best card ever, we're talking more like Zombie Chow, more like Dark Iron Dwarf level.
yes,
Not like
yes,
North Sea Kraken, not like Fire Elemental, definitely not like Dr. Boom or Coghammer or like Muster for Battle, right?
right. And let's just think back on kind of where this card was rated, since the beginning. And since the beginning, like, because Argent Squire has been around forever, it's never been known as a great card. And this card has not changed at all, it hasn't been nerfed or buffed. And the meta has changed, but, this is a typical 1 mana 1/1 with Divine Shield. So why is it so good? It's a question that I am still grappling with. It's apparently amazing. And if I were to explain it, I would say it's a great way to take the
Still
board.
fighting him, Merps. You're still fighting the Argent Squire. Just accept the Argent Squire into your life.
You can hear it
and
in my
into your
voice,
decks.
right? You can hear it in my voice. You can see it in my face. You could feel it in my soul. But I have to agree, it's an incredibly sticky minion. And a lot of the times when people play it against me, because of the numerous things that you can do with just anything on the board at all now in TGT, I'm always like, man, I have to bop the shield off and then I have to kill off the 1/1. And it's just really annoying for that 1 mana. Dudes from Paladins are really annoying, but they take 2 mana and they don't have a shield, right? And with Argent Squire, it just gives you that board presence, gives you that flexibility, so you could Dark Iron Dwarf it, so you can
you can buff it.
power
That's a
overwhelming.
big part.
Yeah. It's a huge part. And also, a lot of the times, you just need that 1 extra damage on the board. And I don't know if that accounts for its incredible win rate, but it's at least part of it.
Yeah, because it's not like sometimes you get a card, right? It's like Leper Gnome and it has a high win rate, and you're like, okay, and then you take a look deeper and you're like, oh, well, people build good aggro decks with Leper Gnome. No one is surprised, right? But and it does really well in Hunter and less well in other classes. And you're like, fine, this is still not a great card. Leper Gnome is not the next coming of the 1-drop revolution. But Argent Squire does well in all kinds of decks. As long as you're not a priest and you're not playing super control, even if you're playing like heavy mid-range decks, Argent Squire gets the job done statistically. And whenever I've had Argent Squire in my deck, I've never given him much credit. But the win rate is really higher than my average decks. Like, I went back and actually counted. It creates like a 0.7 more wins for me on my admittedly small sample size. And it's annoying, right? You think like everyone knows Haunted Creeper is good, that it's like the best 2-drop. And if you don't think it's the best 2-drop, you at least have it really high up there. And that's because it's essentially 3/1/1s for 2 mana. Well, this is 2/1/1s for 1 mana. So it should be even better. And on top of that, you don't even have to kill it to get the rest of its ability, right? It has a 1-to-1 ratio with its with its death rattle compared to its normal state. So the way that Hearth Arena thinks about it, and the way that I think about Divine Shields, is that it creates 2 copies of a minion. It's not like a shield on a minion. It's more like this is a minion with only 1 health, and then it has a death rattle that summons the actual minion without Divine Shield. That has the same exact effect as what Divine Shield is on a macro level, right? Like, on a micro level, you can do different tricks with Divine Shield and things that you may not be able to do with that. But, so in this case, it's effectively a 1/1 with a death rattle that says summon a 1/1, which makes it look pretty favorable when you compare it to the Haunted Creeper, which is a great card. And then you have to consider that 1-drops have the additional benefit of, if you go first, it's just a free tempo card on the board if you happen to have it in your hand. Whereas you're always going to try to get your 2-drops.
Yeah, turn 1's always been that black sheep turn, right? Where you're never expected to drop anything on turn 1. So when you do drop something on turn 1, Worgen Infiltrator, Argent Squire, Zombie Chow, it's so powerful. Because usually, in terms of the meta, turn 1, you're just expected to waste that mana.
Yeah.
So if you don't waste that mana, that's just suddenly a huge benefit.
It's a bonus. And here's the one more thing about tempo, right? A 1/1 has way better tempo than a 2/1 if you value it correctly, because a 2/1 can get pinged for essentially near even tempo, whereas a 1/1 getting pinged would lose your opponent tempo. So, yeah, you'd rather have a 2/1 than a 1/1, but if you have to pay the price for a 2/1 or you pay the price for a 1/1 when you're summoning it or when it gets valued in a card or something, you'd rather have the 1/1 body, especially in the early game, because
Yep.
it's not going to get pinged. So you're actually going to get to use the 1/1, and you're not going to lose the card or the part of the card or whatever. It's one of the reasons why I hate Dragon Link mechanic.
So you look at the tier list, we're still hating on the Argent Squire by a little bit, although it has consistently gone up with every update.
I've been pushing it. Like, I think the last 3 months, I've been pushing it really hard, just like into Merps' face and being like, look, we can't hold it down anymore. I'm on board. I'm fully on board the Argent Squire train. Merps is like still resisting, but we're getting there.
We're getting there slowly. All right. So next up, we also lumped it with the Argent Horse Rider and Argent Commander, which I think we lumped it in more so because these have Argent in the name, and less because
and divine shields on their bodies.
And divine shield. So Argent Horse Rider is really half of an Argent Commander. It's literally one half of an Argent Commander, and
in mana cost and power and everything.
Yep. And Argent Horse Rider was something that we initially undervalued so much, and by we I mean Adwikta.
Okay, so we already had the episode where Team Adwikta defeated Team Merps. That hasn't changed. I'm not conceding the victory here. Team Adwikta has thoroughly crushed Team Merps in the Predict the TGT card game.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But there's one huge outlier. There's one really huge outlier, and it is Argent Horse Rider, which I wanted it, like, I pretty much convinced Merps that it was that low with my awesome ability to logic.
At like 3
no, I use good reasoning. Okay, you were able to fight back on many cards. You just did not stand up for the Argent Horse Rider.
Well, when it's 3 a.m., what was your reasoning? Because for me, I was like, it's just a lot of times a better Harvest Golem, and it's one half of a Argent Commander, which is really good. So what was your argument?
My argument is it's a 2/1, and 2/1 suck.
Was that
at 3 a.m., that was apparently really convincing. So it
at
does
3 a.m.,
do the
lots of
job,
things are
right?
convincing.
So it does do the job, right? It clears something that has 2 health that needs to be cleared, but then it leaves behind a body that's very easily pinged. It's not a 3-drop, right, which hurts it. Whereas an Argent Commander is at 6 mana, so do you really need 6 drops? Not really, right? Even late games that don't necessarily need 6 drops on turn 6. You can play 2 smaller cards. So the Argent Commander doesn't suffer from the fact that it's not a drop, whereas the Argent Horse Rider does. Or I thought it did. As it turns out, Argent Horse Rider, like, as a drop, is not bad at all. You're often, like, hurting for that, like, extra little bit of damage to, like, help clear the board, or you just have a 3/2 to run it into, best case scenario. So my big misestimation was not about how... So 2 parts, right? So first of all, I didn't see the Paladin rise coming in terms of popularity. So I thought there was going to be more pings around. There isn't. Mages actually fell. And Rogues, despite us saying that it's the #1 class, the popularity is not that high. It's never been that high. Rogue has always been kind of in there as like a top 3 class, but it's never been terribly popular. I think it's like a little clunky, people feel. But with the rise of Paladins, who can't ping, and the drop of Mages, relatively, they kind of switch spots from like 25% to 20%, from 20% to 25% of what you see in the meta. That hurts in my theory of, it'll just get pinged away. And then, also, I just totally I underestimated how useful a 2/1 charge that leaves a body is playable on turn 3, either on an empty board or to, like, help you trade on that board and be, like, a very good turn 3 play, right? As, like, a drop, so to speak.
Definitely. I agree. And I think part of the huge value of Argent Horse Rider is for 3 mana, and when you're going on turn 3 or turn 4, you can't just think of it as, my opponent, if they have a ping, can ping it down. That ping in the early stages, it's so awkward. This is why a lot of times you're like, man, I really hope he pings on turn 3. Or he already played a 2-drop. What are the chances he has another 2? And, a lot of the times you put them in that awkward situation where it's like, well, I guess I should just drop my 3/5 instead of pinging that thing because I have nothing else to play. And bam, you just have 2 extra damage right there.
Yeah,
so it's
and even if
really
you do get
spot.
pinged, like, unless you're facing the Rogue, one more reason Rogue is so good. Unless you're facing the Rogue, they've spent 2 mana, you've spent 3, so they kill your remaining body, so you've spent 1 mana to deal 2 damage to something. That's an
That's great.
arcane shot. That's like a holy smite. That's a good card, right? That's a
Right.
claw. That's a 60 rated card right there in and of itself in a pretty bad situation where your opponent happens to be the mage and pings it off with just a hero power. So
Right.
I don't know what I was thinking. I put it in the same place as like a Bloodfin Raptor. Uh,
You did.
and it's now as good as a Yeti. So that went up quickly. So yeah, when we talk about biggest misses, Murloc Knight definitely on there, but everyone missed on that. Argent Horse Rider was like our unique miss in that I think a lot of people thought it was going to be a good card. And I had my reasons for thinking it's not going to be a good card, and I, followed it as I usually do. And in this one case, out of many cases where my feelings were pretty spot on, in this case it was very far off. And it's a neutral card, which makes it hurt a lot more, right? Like, why is the Kraken? Why was like my predictions about Kraken treated so highly? It's because it was a neutral card, and it was because we really went out of our way to like put it really high. Argent Horse Rider on the bright side is not like godly good, right? It's not like a Kraken, so we haven't missed like in a way that
Right.
totally screws the meta over. But it is a definite miss, and we've adjusted for it. It's now at a Yeti level. It may even go up another 2 points, but probably not more than that.
Yeah, and I think it's so important that when you talk about Argent Horse Rider and your mistakes, that you should also talk about that everything you got correct to try to cover up this huge
Aw,
mistake that.
thanks.
Yeah, I
Let's
think
talk
that
more
was-
about what I got correct. One thing I do want to bring to people's attention about Argent Horse Rider and Argent Commander, and it's one of the weaknesses of kind of the way that I value things in general, which is I take more of a high level macro view of things, especially with Hearth Arena and things like that when it comes to valuation, rather than a more micro card to card, which card beats which card specific thing that like people who play constructed are very used to thinking in the micro terms because you know what cards are being played. So if you beat the current meta, that's how it works. In the arena, because you have to account for everything, you think more macro. And Argent Horse Rider and Argent Commander are both slightly actually overcosted cards. An Argent Commander deals 4 damage. That's worth what, 3 mana? You look at a Shadow Blast, like a Shadow Bolt for Warlock. That's not even a good card, right? It's like a bad removal or like a not so good removal. That's 3 mana. Now, what's a 4/2 body left on the board worth? Less than 3 mana. You wouldn't play a 4/2 for 3. That's like a bad 3 mana card. You would want a 4/3 for 3, and even that's just like a slightly above average card, right? It's not like we're putting Injured Blademaster that high. So this is a card that should really cost 5.5 mana in terms of tempo. Where it gets it back is in theory card advantage, but it doesn't really get it back in card advantage either. It's actually 5.5 card advantage too. It just lets you split it up so you can get the efficiency.
Yes.
So
it's a good mixture of initiative and efficiency as well, and I think that's really important.
So you get 5.5's worth of power on the board. You get it for 6 mana. But because of that flexibility, the swing on the board is going to be more than 5.5 mana, or else you wouldn't use this card.
Yeah. So some cards have their full value based purely on tempo. Piloted Shredder, right? That's the tempo card. For 4 mana, you put it out there. It's worth the body and the stats are worth so much more than 4 mana. But it doesn't have initiative. It doesn't have that kind of efficiency or flexibility, and it has the RNG factor, which hurts it a little bit. And you compare it to something like Argent Commander, where Advocate calculated it out. In terms of just doing the basic math, 6 is a little bit overcosted, but because of that efficiency and because of initiative, which is so important. And also turn 6, we talked about this a little bit, but turn 6 matches up evenly with the Paladin's Murloc Knight. Murloc Knight, hero power, you Argent Commander, kill off the Murloc Knight, and the Murloc that spawns usually trades with your guy. So at least you're kind of staying even there. That's another consideration.
Man, as soon as they make a Murloc with taunt, this is gonna get out of hand. Okay, so that's card good bad. It was a little extended discussion, but I wanted to cover all of those cards because I felt like there were good discussions to be having at this point in the meta. So now we go to our final segment, which is the class discussion on Mage. We finally get to play Mage, Merps, in the Arena Coupe. Can you believe it?
I am excited. I don't remember last time, but but it's been a while. This is what happens when you only have once a week, right? But very excited. We talked about Mage when we talked about the class tier list. And what is there to say about Mage? Powerful, not a lot of weaknesses. Flame Strike really defines the class, but you can go fast, you can go slow, and it's just really annoying to deal with. And starting on turn 7, people have to respect the Flame Strike. Less so now, but people still have to give respect to it, especially if we get up to, like today, if we get up to a high number of wins, like 7, 8, 9, you will see if you're facing a good opponent, they're going to play a little bit slower and a little bit different to try to play around that hypothetical Flame Strike, which is another kind of tool in the Mage's arsenal. Even if you don't got it, they still have to play around it.
And the ability to ping without taking damage to your face for the late game.
So
that is game change, right? Your opponent drops a Raptor, you just hold back a little bit, and there, you got your card advantage back, right? You just like win a card in the late game with just your hero power. It's pretty ridiculous. And that's why Warlock is a good matchup against Mage, right? Because Warlock can keep up, but other classes generally can't. And it's worked out really well. Obviously, Mage powerful hero power, Inspire mechanic, TGT. There's a dilution effect going on, so it's super powerful class-defining spells are seen a little less often, which everyone's kind of grateful for. But that 3-drop with the Spellslinger, also pretty good. I do think that a lot of people were expecting Mage to really like dominate this meta because of the Inspire mechanics and because Spellslinger as a 3/4 is a very good drop. And you actually, like, you see it being used in constructed tempo mages. And tempo, like, if you were to try to figure out, like, what an arena deck would be in constructed, it would be a tempo deck. It would be like a bad tempo deck or a bad mid-range deck. So when certain cards are being used in tempo decks, they're probably usually pretty good in the arena, and the card is, but it's not game changing, right? It's like the problem with like giving Shaman all of these like big minions that are like slightly undercosted. You're still not going to cause the big swings, even though the card itself is very good. And that's the problem that Mage is having right now. That's why it's not better than Rogue. That's why a lot of people think it's not better than Paladin. But I think we're sticking with it. We still think Mage is around the same level as a Paladin. And yeah, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I think part of the reason that Mage isn't at the top tier is look at how it matches up against the top 2 classes, or like the other top 2 classes, Rogue and Paladin. What does Mage have a hard time doing at the
It sucks against Rogue.
Yeah, I mean, it sucks against Rogue. It also, Paladins with the right cards can make it difficult because Rogues have a difficult time AoE clearing in the early to mid game. It really only has, that Blizzard or that Flame Strike. And a lot of the times, you can have your Frostbolt, but if you don't have your Frostbolt, what kind of small remover do you have? Flame Cannon, lots of times, you're facing up against a
Not that Murloc Knight.
Yeah, exactly.
Flame Cannon's not going to do it.
So a lot of times, and this is why we've had this discussion, I think Arcane Explosion is not that bad anymore, but...
it hasn't been bad in a while.
Yeah,
like in GVG, it was used to clear like super aggro decks, and it's just Arcane Explosion. It feels like a bad card because it has a very small effect, and there's this card called Fan of Knives where for 1 extra mana you get your card back. But it's actually just it costs the right amount of mana for its effect.
It does,
and that effect is not that bad. That effect is, it clears the board when you have no other ways to do it, right? Because one of the ways, and if you read Killing Jaina, the article that we wrote like, I don't know, a year ago, which is still fairly accurate. Like, when we start doing the Killing series, which is the arena matchup series of articles where we tell you how to defeat classes, that you're really going to see that Killing Jaina hasn't changed much. And one of the key ways you do it is you make the hero power awkward to use by making 2 things with 1 health, or by putting it on turns when your opponent wouldn't want to use the hero power, like turn 5 or turn 3. And what solves that problem? Arcane Explosion. Oh yeah, you have 4 minions at 1 health? Perfect.
Yep.
So that's where Mage is, and I still, like, personally, I think Mage is still better than Paladin in the hands of a top player, but I'm a little less sure about that. And we heard from the interview with Hafu 2 weeks ago. She's fully on board the Paladin train, and we're going to talk to her again, as well as Crip, or I'm going to talk to her and Crip. Merps will hang out in the back. Never Merps. Merps's day will come soon. But I'll be talking with Hafu and Crip about it, and I'll see where they think. Because I think Crip is also really high on the Paladin. I think this may be we're kind of staking out some unpopular opinions here by putting Rogue on top. So we'll have a good debate about it. But for the record, my record in TGT with Mage and Rogue combined with a sample size of 7 runs.
Ooh.
It's such a huge sample size, right?
Yeah.
These are like these are solo runs or runs with Merps. And the average is 11.5 wins per run. So I think Hafu and Crip's Paladins are going to have a little bit of a tough time beating that record. So hopefully we continue this.
Would you like to share your Warrior average?
Well, I got an 8-win run over the weekend with Warrior, so it's no longer 1.5. It's now something like 4.
Man.
Yeah.
Oh wow. That's ooh, okay. I'm very wrong
overachieving with the Warrior here.
I'm sorry. That was my bad.
All right, but yeah, hopefully we can continue the Mage record going on into this next run that's happening after this Lightforge on the Arena Coupe. And that's it for us. We've gone a little bit over, but I thought it was a good discussion. And next week,
Definitely.
Car Good Bad will feature, this is Merps' pick, so blame him, not me, Doomsayer, which is the most important card in the meta, because every time a Shredder comes out, we talk about Doomsayer.
We do. But I think there was a lot of discussion for just Doomsayer as a card, not a Shredder drop, just a card.
Okay.
Fancy.
We'll see whether we think it's good or bad next week.
All right.
Thank you for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys next week.
Take care, guys.